All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe for all of our updates. Check out btexamreview.com for all our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass the exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's keep going. You're trying to get work done in your apartment, but your neighbor's dog won't stop barking. You turn the TV volume up to the point that you can no longer hear the dog. You now start turning your TV up in the morning. What caused the behavior change? So we have a behavior change question, and behavior change is typically caused by reinforcement, punishment, or extinction. And so when you're looking at behavior change, the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, did the behavior increase or did it decrease? That's going to give you a good starting point to identify the consequence that led to the behavior change. So in this case, what do we know? We know you're trying to get work done. The dog is barking. And so as a result, you turn the volume up, and then the consequence is you can't hear the dog anymore. How did that affect your behavior? Well, you now always turn your TV up in the morning. So your behavior increased. Since your behavior increased, we know reinforcement was the cause. How do we know that? Well, because anytime behavior increases, it's due to reinforcement. Decreases can be caused by punishment or extinction, which makes it a little more challenging, but we don't have to worry about that here. We're focused on reinforcement. And so we have to look at the consequence because the consequence is what is going to change future behavior. So the antecedent is the dog is barking. The behavior is you turn the TV volume up. What is the consequence? The consequence is you can't hear the dog anymore. So as a result of turning the volume up, you removed that barking sound. And so when you remove something, do we consider that positive or negative? Well, we consider that negative. Negative is the removal of a stimulus due to a consequence, right? And so if our behavior increased due to reinforcement and the consequence was the removal of something, what caused the behavior change? A, positive reinforcement. A does have reinforcement, but the consequence was not positive, right? Because the consequence was the removal of the dog. Don't mistake turning the volume up as the consequence. Turning the volume up was the response. And I think that's where most people go wrong on these questions. They misinterpret the response as the consequence. The consequence follows the response. The consequence of turning the volume up was the removal of the barking dog. And so what happened was we had negative reinforcement, which caused our behavior change. And then, of course, C and D are punishment, but the behavior increased. And like we talked about, when your behavior increases, it must be reinforcement. So, what caused the behavior change? B, negative reinforcement. A task analysis reveals the first step of making dinner reservations is picking a restaurant to go to, and the last step is confirming your reservation online. How would you use forward chaining to start teaching this skill? All right, so we have a skill acquisition question or a teaching question, and specifically, we're going to use forward chaining to teach the skill. Whenever you get a term, let's start defining that term immediately. Forward chaining is what? Forward chaining is when we take a task chain and we teach the first step first, and then prompt through the rest. Then we teach the first and second step, so on and so forth. It's your typical way of teaching a new skill. So if we're going to use forward chaining, we have to understand what are we trying to teach. Well, we've done a task analysis on making dinner reservations, and we know the first step is picking the restaurant, and the last step is confirming the reservation. If we're going to use forward chaining, where do we start? Well, we start with the first step. So the idea behind forward chaining is we're going to teach this first step. We want the learner to do it themselves, and then we provide reinforcement. So if we're going to use forward chaining, we're going to start by picking a restaurant. So let's look at A. Provide the learner with reinforcement once they pick a restaurant. Good. It's exactly what we predicted. And you're going to find as you get more fluent and you practice more, you're going to start predicting answer choices. A looks good. We're going to reinforce for completing that first step in forward chaining. Now, let's read all of our answer choices. B, provide the learner with reinforcement after they confirm the reservation. B is looking at the final step. So that might be for backwards chaining, or if we've already gone through all of forward chaining, but we're just starting, so we're not going to get there yet. C, provide the learner with reinforcement if they complete the full chain independently. Again, That might come at the end of forward chaining or maybe for total task chaining or even backward chaining, but we're not there yet. We're only at the start. So at the start of forward chaining, we're focused on that first step. And then D, provide the learner with reinforcement if they ask for help completing the task. It's not the goal here, right? We want the learner in chaining to do this task chain independently, unless for some reason help is built in. But that's not the case here. We want the learner to pick a restaurant first because we're using forward chaining and because that is the first step. And so, if we're going to use forward chaining to teach a skill, we're going to provide the learner with reinforcement once they pick a restaurant. D'Angelo is working with a fourth grader who has started to cry when presented with unknown task demands because they do not want to complete the task. Fourth grader does not engage in these behaviors if they know how to do the task. If D'Angelo wants to reduce crying, which of the following choices represents the most appropriate alternative behavior? All right, so we have a behavior reduction question. And so we're focused on what? Well, D'Angelo wants to reduce crying. But specifically, the question wants to know, and you always have to answer the question, right? What represents the most appropriate alternative behavior? When we're choosing alternative behaviors, we want to choose behaviors that are more or less functionally equivalent and that are going to help us accomplish our goal. And we want behaviors that are going to benefit the client. When you reduce a behavior, you always want to try to replace it with something else because behavior serves a purpose. So if you are removing one behavior, you want to try to replace it with something else. So, what are we trying to accomplish here? What do we know? We know the fourth grader cries when presented with an unknown task demand because they don't want to complete the task. So it looks like escape. So we want to try to limit the escape here, right? Because we know the fourth grader doesn't engage in the behaviors if they know how to do the task. So it's only when the task is unknown. Once they learn the task, the behavior goes away. We really want them to start trying, right, and doing the task because when they learn it, they don't engage in the behaviors. So, what's a good, appropriate alternative behavior to reduce the crying and also meet our goals? A, have the fourth grader ignore the presented task and do something else. Well, that might limit the crying, but does that accomplish what we're trying to set out to do, which is get the fourth grader to complete the task or learn the task? Well, no, they can't just go on and ignore every presented task when they don't want to do it. So A is alternative, but it doesn't necessarily seem appropriate. B, have the fourth grader communicate that they need help. Sure, this is a really good alternative to crying for the unknown task demand. Instead of crying, just ask for help. And if help is given, we can help teach the fourth grader the task. And we know once they learn the task, the behaviors don't happen. So B looks pretty good. C, have the fourth grader get up and leave the room for a 5-minute break. Again, it's better than A because at least it's only a limited break, but they're still getting away from the task. It's an alternative to crying, but it doesn't seem as good as B, which keeps them engaged with the task. C, have the fourth grader get a friend to do the task for them. Well, we don't want to do D because it's very similar to A. D, the fourth grader still isn't actually completing the task. Their friend is. And so when you're thinking about appropriate alternative behaviors, you want something that is, of course, alternative, right, or different than the target behavior, but you also want to make it appropriate so you can accomplish what we're setting out to do. And so in this case, the most appropriate alternative behavior is going to be B. Have the fourth grader communicate that they need help. This hopefully will reduce the crying while also keeping the fourth grader engaged with the task so that they can learn how to do it. This was a challenging question. So if you got it right, fantastic. If not, that's okay. Review it and really understand why is B the most appropriate. A behavior technician found out this morning that their dog might require surgery in the coming weeks. The behavior technician is supposed to work with 2 clients today, but isn't sure she is capable of providing her best services. What should the technician do? This is kind of a ethical preparing for session question, and we're asking about the technician. So what do we know about the technician? Well, we know they just found out their dog might require surgery. So that's obviously can be traumatic or impactful if you know your dog might need this intensive surgery. And so the behavior technician is supposed to have 2 clients, but she isn't sure she can provide her best services. And so Think about what our priority is in ABA and in any sort of therapy. You want to provide the best possible services you can to your client, and you want to limit and prevent harm because we are trying to accomplish things that are going to make the client's life better. If this behavior technician is worried that this news is affecting her ability to provide her best services, what should they do? A, the technician should go to her sessions regardless of how she is feeling. That's just not true. Okay. Things happen in everybody's lives that are going to affect your mental state, your physical state. And if you're not going to be in a place where you can provide good or great services, then it might not be best to go. Because if you're going to provide services that aren't adequate, you might do more harm than good. So the technician needs to realize this and do something else. B, the technician should not tell her supervisor she is having a difficult time, but should skip sessions. That is also not appropriate because we have to communicate with the supervisor. If you don't feel you can communicate with your supervisor, that's a different problem entirely. But a huge part of the task list and a huge part of the responsibility of technicians is communication with the supervisor. See, the technician should communicate how she is feeling to her supervisor. Absolutely. Let the supervisor know the situation, work through it with them, and help them or let them help you make the right decision. C looks good. D, the technician should call the client's parents first and let them know how she is feeling. She should first go to the supervisor. That is the role of the RBT. When things happen, when there are events that need to be discussed, the first person the technician should discuss those events with is the supervisor. Now, if she can't provide her best services, then more than likely she should not go work with the clients. But the first thing she should do is communicate how she is feeling to the supervisor, and then they can make a decision together. Which of the following statements is not true about a functional analysis? So, what is a functional analysis? A functional analysis is a type of assessment that is going to help us determine the function of the behavior. It is the best way to determine the actual function of a behavior. We have indirect assessments, which are interviews and surveys where we're not actually observing a behavior. And then we have direct assessments where we're actually observing the behavior. And then we have these functional analyses where we're actually manipulating antecedents and consequences in order to observe or determine the function. The question is asking what statement is not true. So we got a not true question. So 3 of these are likely true, 1 isn't. Let's look at A. It is the strongest assessment for identifying a function. That is true about the functional analysis. It is absolutely the strongest assessment for identifying a function. B, it does not involve manipulation of antecedents or consequences. What did we just talk about? With the functional analysis, we are actually manipulating things in the environment because we want to determine the function. So B doesn't look true. C, it should be conducted after careful planning. Absolutely. Functional analyses should be planned out. They should be thought out because what you're doing is you're going in and actually manipulating consequences. And a lot of times you're going to be reinforcing problem behavior because that's going to help you determine what is maintaining that behavior. So D, it sometimes involves reinforcing problem behavior, is also true. If we're trying to determine if the function is escape, with the functional analysis, we might allow the client to escape just to determine or to be sure that escape is actually maintaining the behavior. And so there's a reason functional analyses should be planned out and really thought out because you are likely going to be reinforcing problem behavior at some point. So, which of the following statements is not true about a functional analysis? Well, it's going to be B. It does not involve manipulations of antecedents or consequences. That is just not true. As always, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.